Is the Bible descriptive or is it normative? Right? There's a sort of notion that the Bible as a piece of revelation is God giving orders to people about how things should be, about how to establish a way of the world. But there's a really basic Judaic concept, which is the world is actually the world was created by the blueprint that is the Bible, right? Which is that the world is actually built after the roadmap. And so what we're reading here is actually descriptive rather than normative. It's not as though we're trying to change, that the Bible changes the world as much as the Bible describes the world, and if you wish to live in accordance with the best possible reality that already exists in the world, you're going to live according to the precepts of the Bible. And so when we're talking about God wanting or God needing or any of the romantic language that's used throughout, Shir HaShirim, right? The Song of Songs is it's a love song. It's an actual erotic love song about the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And does that mean that God literally wants to make love to the Jews, or the Jews literally want to make love to God? Not really, but it's the best analog that we can make. And the thing that elicits what God truly wants of us, right? Which is that emotional response to Him, that abiding passion that we should have for Him, even if He doesn't have quite the same kind of thing, right? There's always going to be, we're about to see, right? We're only going to be able to see His back. We can't see His face.
If God really does have wants, then I will repeat something I heard many years ago from a rabbi who asked the audience, so who's the most tragic figure in the Bible? And everybody threw out a name, and he said, I'll tell you who, God.
Correct.
And that has always obviously stuck with me. If God has feelings, I actually feel bad for Him. I'm not being cute, I'm being literal, because He looks upon the creature He had the most faith that He did good with. We're the only day, the creation of man, that God said, and He saw it was very good, not just good. And it says, God got sad into His heart when He looked at the human being in Genesis. So I just want to throw that out. I feel bad for God, and I mean it literally.
When push comes to shove, I think the secularists think the same thing. And I would say the reason I think that is because of the Nuremberg judgment. Right?
Secularists think the same thing?
The same thing, that in some sense that the spirit of the cosmos itself can be, ridden with sorrow because of the magnitude of a transgression. Because the Nuremberg judgment was that some things are wrong, right? The crimes against the Jews, the Holocaust. In some cosmic sense, that was wrong, right? An a priori axiomatic sense, independent of your culture, independent of your training, independent of your motivations. If you participated in that crime against humanity, that was wrong. And there's an implication there of a cosmic wrong, right? That something's
But is there cosmic sadness?
Well, something has to respond, like, why else is it wrong? Right? There's some implication there that the concept of wrong itself has something about unfortunate suffering as part and parcel of it. And people can dispense with that and say, well, that's all nonsense. It's like it's so easy for you to dispense with the Nuremberg judgment, is it? Because that's not an easy thing to do.
It's also the best way to live, meaning that if the Bible is describing the best way to live, then the best way to live is to live as though you have the capacity to harm the world, right? As though you have that capacity to make God sad. And it also explains why, in Judaism, I mentioned briefly in the last episode, how Judaism says that you're supposed to both fear God and love God, right? In the Hebrew, it's ahavat shemayim and yirat shemayim, right? You're supposed to love God and fear God. And how do you do both of those things at the same time? And an answer that I heard one time that I thought was quite beautiful is the same way that you love and fear your parents, meaning that you love them so much that you fear harming them, you fear hurting them, right? When you love people, you know where all their vulnerabilities are, and that's deliberately where you don't prey on them, right? If you really don't love somebody, you know where the vulnerabilities are, and you prey on those vulnerabilities, and that's how you destroy relationships. But if you actually want to have the best relationship with someone, you love them and you fear them, but you don't fear what they're going to do to you. You fear what you could do to them. And I think that's how you find the unity of love and fear, is in exactly this, recognizing that God is desperate to be with us. God is desperate to experience with us the joys of the world that He's created for us. And
so the notion that God created the human being because He was lonely does not strike you as odd? I've heard that, and I've never known how to react to it. God got lonely?
Again,
but
I think all this is
maybe that's
analogical,
true.
right? I mean, this is Maimonides. Maimonides
It's no more
just says it's all an
absurd than any
analogy,
other
right?
explanation.
But wait, if it's all
cosmos.
an analogy, then he didn't get lonely.
Well, I
An
mean,
analogy
it's the best-
is not the same as reality.
Because but the Bible is constantly speaking analogical. God doesn't have hands either, right?
I don't have a
we
problem
can't
with
change
that,
it.
but then we can't have, I don't think we could have our cake and eat it. If it's all analogy, it's not real.
It's not analogy. I mean, it's
Okay, so it's not analogy.
Well, here, wait. Maybe it can be analogy and be something deeper than that as well. I mean, here's one thing you might contemplate. So reality is that to which you must adapt. Let's make that generalization. It's a definitional generalization. And then you might ask, well, what's the best way to live? And then you might say, well, to manifest a personality rooted in love, that is the best way to live. And maybe that's some balance between justice and mercy, and that's the balance between the hands of God. And there's a metaphor, that's a metaphorical in some way, the use of love and the use of mercy and justice. But then there's a stark reality underneath that too, is that, well, if you want to have great relationships with other people, that's not a bad starting place, and so you're likely going to thrive if that's actually the way you conduct yourself. And that thriving is real, and the universe of interactions you have with other people is real. And then you might say, well, if you extended that love to beyond the human, to the degree that you were capable of that, and you see echoes of that in these stories where even the cattle are allowed to rest or on the Sabbath. You want to extend that personality of care even beyond the human, and that seems like a laudable thing to do. And there's nothing about that isn't adaptation to the structure of reality itself. I mean, I think the idea that this isn't a personal relationship is only strange to us because we accept axiomatically the idea that the world is an object. And that's not obvious. Here's another reason why it's not obvious is when you look at objects, we thought forever that you see the object and you add something normative or value-laden to it. But all of the most modern cognitive neuroscience of perception shows that that's just wrong. You see the value. In fact, you might even see the value, the meaning, before you see the object. It might be a prerequisite of object perception itself. And so then that really begs the question is, what makes you so sure that the value isn't baked into the structure of reality itself? It could easily be. And it seems, it depends on how you define reality. But if reality is that which you adapt to, and you adapt to reality by adopting a value-laden schema, which you seem to have to do even to perceive, the only question then becomes, what's the proper value-laden schema? And the biblical answer to that is something like a personal relationship with something like the highest personality. It's like, so you could think of that as metaphorical, but it's also real. It's like there isn't anything more real than that. And I also think that's true, partly because real. One of the things that people accept as real is pain. And there's a subjective element to that, but there's nothing that you can't find anything that people act in relationship to that demonstrates their belief in reality more than how they act when they're in pain. It's like, say what you want and see how that works when you're in pain. It doesn't work. You're going to act like it's real. And so then you might say, well, pain is the fundamental reality. But then you might say, well, maybe is there something that can help you cope with or mitigate pain or prevent it? And the answer is, well, yes, there's all sorts of things. Love helps with that. And I mean literally. And so then wouldn't you say those things that help you deal with pain are more real than pain? And then if it's your participation in this vertical morality and this horizontal morality, your ability to align yourself with the highest and join with other people as a consequence, that's an ennobling of your spirit. It helps you stave off pain and suffering. How is there anything more real than that? And you might say, I don't believe that. I say, well, wait till you're in pain and see what you have left if you don't have that.